everyone, and welcome back to another episode here at the Damage Report. It's me, John, in a building that was once blissfully abandoned, and now people are starting to creep into my home away from home. But I'm dealing with it, as we're all dealing with so much about 2020. One thing I'm happy to deal with is our co-host for today, Dr. Aqualus Gordon. How's it going?
What's up, buddy? How you doing?
How's it going? So longtime viewers of the Damage Report, like way back, like 2 years, and especially back in the couple of months where we were filming shows that literally no one saw. So if you were a viewer of one of those, it's a bit creepy. I don't know how you did that, but Quay appeared on the show several times. I would interview him about the intersection of psychology and politics. And that's because your expertise is you are a psychology professor, right, Quay?
That's right. I teach at the University of Central Missouri. I also have a small clinical practice in the Kansas City area. So, spread out a little bit, doing some psych work.
Okay, and this is non-political, but members of Dragon Squad, viewers of the show, should know that Quay is arguably a bigger nerd than me, even, and that will be coming up in the show later on. Actually,
that's doubtful, John.
We'll see. But anyway, very glad to have you on. It's been a long time coming. So welcome to the show. Hopefully Dragon Squad will be very receptive of you. It should be awesome. Anyway, for those of you who are already here, and several thousand of you are, please hit the like button and share the stream so that people know that we're live. And if you chat along during the show, sending us tweets, super chats, things like that, we'll be responding to your questions and comments as we go on. I am seeing one comment in the chat about sound and video not syncing, and my preview monitor seems a little bit off. I don't know what that's about. Doesn't seem like a lot of people are saying that, so we're just going to press forward. And with that, Quay, are you ready to do some news?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. Basically, like the one big priority that in theory should be accomplished before the election is passing a second stimulus. I mean, why not? Why shouldn't the government do two things during the worst year in most people's living memory? They did one 6 months ago. The clock's been ticking. And Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, who, let's be fair, has passed other stimulus bills since then that haven't gone anywhere because Mitch McConnell's literally the worst. She set a Tuesday night deadline for the two sides, the side of sanity and those with Trump, to come to an agreement about stimulus that would be able to pass both chambers of Congress before election day, which is just 2 weeks away now. So that was over the weekend. She said, Tuesday night, we're gonna do this. White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows said yesterday that the deadline is certainly welcomed by us. But I don't know who Mark Meadows actually speaks for these days, because Donald Trump is apparently trashing him behind his back constantly. Donald Trump doesn't know what he wants. So it's hard to say, Quay, exactly what the odds are of something being done. And basically what we have to go at this point is rumor. It seems like it would be helpful in the re-election bids of all of these Republicans. Do you think that it's likely that something might actually pass?
I keep wondering about that. And one of the things I wonder about specifically is actually from the side of the Democrats. Is there some impetus to not get a deal done? And same with Republicans, is there some impetus not to get a deal done just because you'd have to work with Democrats to do that? So I wonder on both sides, honestly, if it's in their interest of just politically. Obviously, it's good for the country and the people, but just politically, is that something that would benefit them?
Yeah, I know that's something that Republicans have said about the Democrats, that they don't want stimulus. They want lockdowns because all of this looks bad for Donald Trump. And like, I get why they would say that. I kind of feel like Donald Trump is doing tons of stuff to make the country as bad off as possible. So I feel like, yeah, if you really want this message to stick, maybe you should pretend that you care. But Nancy Pelosi for months has been at least acting like she wants some sort of deal. And I find it hard to believe that if the Senate passed something, that all of a sudden Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats in the House would go from the ones passing bills that don't go anywhere to suddenly deciding, no, we're not gonna do anything. You even have Democrats who are saying, look, we will pass bills that are smaller than we want, that contain components that we don't want, just to get something done. Representative Ro Khanna is a great example of that. So if they pass something and it was up to Nancy Pelosi, I just don't see her blocking it at this point.
Sure, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think she's not gonna be able to block it. I think if anything didn't get done on purpose, it'd be sort of a behind the scenes affair. Not gonna show up with the Senate bill ready to go and say, actually, we're not gonna take this up. That looks bad for all the Democrats. So I think it's more of a backroom deal. I think we won't ever know what really happens, whether it gets passed or not. I think it's going to be the type of thing where, they're both pointing fingers at each other about something they said in that smoke-filled room whenever they're making the meeting they're supposed to have.
Yeah, and look, effectively, what you just described there is what we have right now. We have that comment from Mark Meadows implying that Donald Trump wants something. We have Trump today saying, I want something bigger than $2.2 trillion. Right. Okay, you say that now, but a week ago you were saying you were done with negotiating. And he doesn't seem to he's never specific about what he wants to actually include in it. I don't know, I don't necessarily trust anything he has to say. I think that he doesn't expect they're gonna pass anything, but he wants voters to think he wants to pass something, which would get him some of the benefit of actually passing it. What I do know is what the people actually want. Not that that matters because we're not really in a democracy, but a new poll shows how popular a stimulus bill would be. New York Times Siena College poll shows that 72% of likely voters, including 56% of Republicans, support passage of a quote, new $2 trillion stimulus package to extend increased unemployment insurance, send stimulus checks to most Americans, and provide financial support to state and local governments. Just 21% of respondents said they are opposed to such an agreement. That is a 51-point gap in the favor of doing something. And by the way, doing something fairly big, $2 trillion. And it specifically in the prompt says, do you want this to provide financial support to state and local governments? And that is where Trump is in a bit of trouble, because that's the part that he always says he doesn't want, that it's this blue state bailout Nancy Pelosi and the Dems are arguing for. But people are perfectly fine with that. Overwhelming support for it. It's an opportunity for Trump, but it doesn't, who knows? By the time we're done with this show, maybe they'll have come to some sort of agreement, but the last couple of weeks haven't given me a lot of optimism in that area.
Yeah, I feel like Trump's he follows polls, and he could be better at it. There's some stuff he seems to look at the polls and decide, hey, I'm gonna do exactly what at least say what the people want me to do. And then other times he sort of totally disregards polls, including any sort of scientific poll or statistic for that matter. But so it is this weird thing, and I think unfortunately it is another just demonstration of how much the political realm is disconnected from what the people want, what the people need actually in this case, which is to say work together, do something to help the folks out who are having a tough time right now. And yet it's political games, even perhaps, and I'm being cynical here, even perhaps from the side of the Democrats who are saying, yeah, we want. Yeah, but not until after we get Trump out of office.
Yeah, maybe we'll see. Perhaps. We'll see. On Trump's personality and whether he goes with a poll or not, we're going to talk a little bit later on about his personality and what lessons we can learn from that. But I do want to say one additional thing, and maybe this goes to what you were saying about that disconnect between what the people want and the legislative outcomes they actually get. That same poll that showed a 51-point approval gap in terms of stimulus also had things like this in terms of wanting a public option for Obamacare. It's 67% want it, 25% don't. That's another big gap. Fracking, like continuing the support of fracking, is at 44% want it, 42% don't. Now that is not a big gap like the other ones we're talking about, but it is very divisive. And that is not generally the way politicians on either the right, well, I should say the Republican Party or the Democratic Party actually talk about it. They talk about it as if, oh my God, if they think we're gonna ban fracking, we're done, we'll never get elected again. But that's not what the population at large seems to be thinking. And that is, by the way, fairly close to, like I saw a poll specifically of Pennsylvania, one of the states that would be affected, that it was just as close. And so you also have really fast, a $2 trillion climate plan to increase the use of renewable energy and build energy efficient infrastructure, sort of a stand-in for a small version of the Green New Deal in this poll is at 66% want it, 26% don't. So it's a pretty clear pattern in terms of public approval for some of these policies.
Yeah, I think so. It's strange to me to just see how much, public opinion is moving, I guess you'd say in a left direction, way faster than even our Democratic politicians, right? I mean, some of them, right? AOC, for instance, being the exception, but that we're way ahead of the game. That people are way ahead of the game on this in terms of doing for the environment and all these other things you mentioned. And politicians just drag their feet. Who knows?
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're gonna have to see throughout today. Supposedly that deadline is tonight. It's also possible that Nancy Pelosi is using the deadline tonight the same way that Trump 2 weeks ago said he was done negotiating. It's just a tactic. Right. We'll have to see.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
Since about 5 minutes into the first Trump-Biden debate, one thing was clear. They got to start muting the mics, man. This isn't working. Like, we're trying to have a society here, and Trump was not going to go along with that. Well, finally, after another vice presidential debate, after the dueling town halls, they're gonna do something about it. So this is reporting according to CNN this morning, former Vice President Joe Biden and President Donald Trump will have their microphones muted during portions of the second and final presidential debate, which is coming up this Thursday night. That's according to the Commission on Presidential Debates. A source close to the commission told CNN the decision on muting the microphones was unanimous by its members and stressed that, quote, this is not a change to rules, but rather a move to promote adherence to rules that have been agreed to by both campaigns. We'll have more details in a moment. Quay, I actually don't know. Did you watch the Interrupt-a-thon? What did you think of it? Was it? So but really fast. So you follow politics, obviously. You're not like, a mainline political commentator. Maybe you're a person who's trying to learn something. What did you think of that debate? What did you learn?
I was really looking at Joe Biden, in the debate, and obviously Trump is trying to steal the show, and I think some of what he's doing is trying to distract from what he was doing was trying to distract from Joe Biden, blah blah blah, his tactics. But for me, what I was really paying attention to was how Joe Biden was handling that set of interruptions, those set of attacks, and comparing it in my mind to how Hillary was handling those different attacks and things like that. And so for me, I came out of it thinking more that Joe Biden was doing a great job of handling those sorts of things than I really was of what Trump was doing. Because for me, it was like, of course he's gonna do that. Of course he's gonna try to, just disrupt the debate instead of actually arguing anything on substance. So I wasn't really surprised. For me, I came out of it thinking, Joe Biden handled that well.
Okay, and a little bit later on, I want to talk about how this might play out in terms of how this change will affect the polls. But I want to give a little bit more information about the actual muting. First of all, potentially we'll see missed opportunity. Jam Tomb on Twitch says, I love the mute, but they have to show him get mad when he's muted, because damn, that's gonna be hilarious. That's true.
Agreed.
Just because he can't talk doesn't mean we shouldn't see him trying to talk. And I got news for you. They're gonna mute his mic his follow-up move to that is clear. Talk loud enough to be heard on Biden's mic.
Yes,
but anyway, sure. So how's it actually going to work? The muting will work like this. At the start of each of the 6 segments of the debate, each candidate will be given 2 minutes to answer an initial question. During that portion, the opposing candidate's microphone will be muted. And they had this to say, the commission. Under the agreed upon debate rules, each candidate is to have 2 minutes of uninterrupted time to make remarks at the beginning of each 15-minute segment of a debate. Those remarks are to be followed by a period of open discussion. Both campaigns this week again reaffirmed their agreement to the 2-minute uninterrupted rule, although we're gonna have the whining in a moment. So let's be very clear about something here. This is a change, but it isn't exactly the change I've been begging for. Only those first 2 minutes each are gonna be muted. That's 9 minutes or so, hypothetically, of wild free-for-all after that. So if you want a hot, sweaty mess, you're still gonna mostly get a hot, sweaty mess. It's just gonna start off a little bit kind of civil.
Do you think that's for, like, why do you think they made that kind of exception for those final minutes? Do you think that's for ratings? Do you think that's to preserve the ability to interrupt and make a point in between? Like, why do you think they even gave him that, or them that, I should say?
That's a good point. I think that they had to do something because so many people were frustrated by the first one. I think they still think that a debate is supposed to have some back and forth. And ideally, when you have 2 rational, mature human beings, it should. I still think debates are mostly pointless, but you have to be able to go back and forth a little bit. What I would say is have the first 2 minutes be muted for each of them, have that open period where they can start to go back and forth, but you still gotta be able to call an audible. If Trump is losing it, or Biden, let's both side this. You gotta be able to press the mute button at that point. Why not keep the option?
I see. Oh, so you're saying that they should do that thing where they're leaving it open, but still be able to, make the call. Hey, he's interrupting too much. Yeah, I can see that.
Reasonable.
I mean, my thought too was, it is a little bit sad that we might be getting away from, at least in this cycle, the ability to just have a conversation. My favorite debates are the ones where they are kind of talking back to each other, and they're following the clock, but it's more of a conversation. They're not so, plugged into it. We've been far away from that for a while, and so now we have this kind of your turn to talk, my turn to talk, your turn to talk type of thing. And you're right, Trump does not seem, at least, to be able to handle that. And so here we are.
Yeah. Now it's a different question whether this change will actually hurt Donald Trump, and we'll get to that in just one moment. Why don't we turn to Trump's response? We knew that the commission on presidential debates might institute a mute. They went 3 in a row without it, and it was a mess. So now it's gonna be muted, and that means that it's time for the whining to begin, and we've got that in both an unofficial and official capacity. So first, we have Donald Trump in his most official capacity. That is speaking with Fox and Friends. Here he is responding to the change.
Debate rules for this last debate in 2 days. They have implemented a 2-minute uninterrupted rule. So they're gonna have basically a mute button. They're gonna mute your microphone while Joe Biden answers for the first 2 minutes, and then mute his when you answer for the next 2 minutes. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think the whole thing is crazy. This commission, I had problems with them 4 years ago where they stifled out my mic during my conversation with Crooked Hillary. And they muted my mic. They did a whole thing. They did this to me already. They modulated it at the time, and they actually had to write me a letter of apology. And they did it on purpose. Look, these people are not good people. This commission, a lot of funny things go on with them. And frankly, Kristen Welker, who I know, and I just went through Savannah Guthrie. I knew what I was getting into, and it worked out fine. But she was out of line. She was totally out of line.
Okay, because she's a woman and women are inherently out of line according to him. So there's a lot of whining to go around, Quite. Yeah, obviously he doesn't like the idea of being muted because his only tactic is to scream over the other person. But he's got an issue with Kristen Welker. He goes on to say later, Kristen Welker is terrible. I mean, she's totally partisan. Her father and mother are big supporters of Joe Biden for a long time. They're supporters of the Democrat Party, and she deleted her entire account. Kristen Welker is far worse than Scully. I don't think he's talking about X-Files. I think he's talking about the guy that pulled out of the other debate. But I do it anyway. But this is the way it is. It's so set up. God, the whining. Kristen Welker is just she's not in the DSA. Like, she's not some crazy leftist. She's one of those regular media people. But he is. I don't know if this is to change people's perceptions ahead of time, to go into the debate thinking that this person is biased against him. But he's whining about the format. He's whining about the host. He's got a lot of whining.
Yeah, little tangent. The first thing I noticed was how sick he sounded. I mean, his voice still sounds really, scratchy. Maybe he just woke up the morning, but it really sounded like he still at least had, some kind of cold respiratory thing. I'm not that kind of doctor, so I'm just noticing as a human. But yeah, he's going to complain about anything. He loves to sort of set himself up as the underdog, such that he can either explain away any failure that he has, or he can say at the end of the day, look how much I, beat this. The odds were against me. Everybody was against me, and I still came out on top. So, it's a sort of classic, low ball technique to just get people to think that he's not going to do well because of somebody else's fault. And then when he doesn't do well because of his own fault, he can point over here and say, well, it's not my fault.
Yeah. Yeah, you did the ethical thing right there where you were like, I'm not that sort of doctor. But honestly, Trump's got Scott Atlas, a guy who's not an expert on infectious disease, running our herd mentality program. So if you want to diagnose his brain or his blood or his bones or whatever you want, I'm fine with it at this point. Well, we're gonna go by the standard of the White House. But anyway, so yeah, we've got the whining. That's him whining about the fact that he's gonna be muted. Bill Stepien, his campaign manager, also wrote a letter saying that he had an issue with the topics, that the fact that the topics are gonna be about fighting COVID, American families, race in America, climate change, national security, and leadership. Those aren't even about foreign policy, man. Come on, you gotta change it. He goes on to say the topics announced by moderator Kristen Welker are serious and worthy of discussion, but only a few of them even touch on foreign policy. We urge you to recalibrate the topics and return to subjects when had already been confirmed. That was an official letter, and I didn't say that. They miswrote it. So they don't want these topics. They want it to be. They don't want it to focus on COVID. And by the way, I don't know if you saw the video of him at a rally yesterday saying, every time I turn on the news, it's Trump. Every time I turn on the news, it's COVID, this, pandemic, that. I think that's him admitting that this is not a winning topic for him. Certainly it's not a topic that he wants to debate again anyway.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think he's obviously always trying to set himself up to be the winner. And when we get to the personality stuff, I am kind of curious, or at least interested to talk about this idea of whether or not he's doing those things on purpose, or if he really kind of can't see outside of his own ego. But yeah, he's gonna do that at every turn. He's gonna say that something's wrong and these aren't the things that I wanna talk about. The microphones have gotta stay on. I think obviously those topics are super important, and the reason they're on the news a lot is because they're really present in a lot of Americans' mindsets. That and I don't know if you said it there, but I also read that he's trying to get away from any discussion of race. Right? These are the things that people are thinking about right now. I think on both sides of the aisle when you're looking at just the general public. Whether or not they're having those conversations in public, I think it is something that a lot of folks are thinking about. So I think that, whether or not it's just for ratings or if it's just that the debate should, to some degree, speak to the thing that is most present in Americans' minds, then yeah, we got to talk about these things. I'm sure there's stuff that's on that list that Joe Biden doesn't want to talk about. But he's mature enough and enough of a professional to say, well, that's just the game we got to play. He's not going to whine about it.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, obviously Trump doesn't want to talk about race. He's going to get another question about white supremacists, and his response is going to be really annoyed and PO'd. That's not going to look good. I don't know exactly which of those topics is going to have the follow-up about QAnon. But we're gonna talk about QAnon later on. Okay, so with the time we have left in this segment, I got 2 questions for you. The first one might be pretty easy, we'll see. So first question, does the debate actually happen? because he's already complaining about a lot of things. So that's the first question. The second question is, this change with having the muting, is it actually bad for him? I know that he wants to interrupt and talk over him, but that doesn't mean that that's actually good for him. You experienced that first debate. So is he gonna do the debate, and will the new format actually hurt him the way he seems to think it will?
I think yes, the debate will happen. I think that Trump doesn't actually, or at least we haven't seen him do it too much as a president, back out of things. And if he does back out of things, he tends to do it quietly. He doesn't tend to sort of make a big ruckus about it, and then he'll do something like sneaking away from the wall because now he's just not talking about it, right? But he's not going to sort of, I don't think, make this big hubbub and then disappear. I think he's at least got enough presence of mind and sort of presence of image in his mind to think about the fact that that's going to look bad. So I don't think he's going to back out. I think he's just going to complain about it, maybe try to get some more concessions. But I expect he'll be there. Is it bad for him? I think you're right on that. I think it can go two ways. If they do the mic muting thing and Trump basically just is quiet or is minimally trying to speak when the mic is muted, I think that will look good. It will make him look more professional, sort of because he was forced to be. I think if what you were kind of joking about earlier is they cut to him and he's trying to talk over the muted mic, or he's trying to yell into Joe Biden's mic, I think he's going to look even more ridiculous. I think that's not going to be good for him. And this all depends. I think in terms of votes is what we're talking about. His core supporters are going to love him no matter what he does, and they're probably going to love him more if he tries to break the rules. They seem to really, enjoy that about him.
They definitely do want that. I think it's never a foregone conclusion that he actually shows up, but he needs this. Like, this is one of the last things that can change, like regularly scheduled things that can switch things up. Next week when he announces a vaccine, that'll switch things up too. But this is one that's supposed to happen. So I think he'll go. I think this change, if they don't do a bunch of him, like if they don't have that, this will help him, because as you said, this is forcing him to look the way a lot of people who don't already support him want him to look. And that really can't help but help him, I think. A lot of people are already voting as we speak, and in the days up until today, more than 29 million people from 45 states have voted as of this morning, either by mail or in person. Nearly half of those votes, almost 14.2 million ballots, have come from Democrat-affiliated voters. Republican-affiliated voters have returned almost 10.1 million ballots. Now, that doesn't mean that that's who they voted for. This is just what their party affiliation is. And obviously, many of those don't have an official listed party affiliation. So we don't know exactly what the distribution of votes is. But so far, we do know that there's a lot of people who are already actively participating, thanks in some states to the fact that the vote has been opened up, especially in terms of mail-in voting, because of the pandemic conditions. To put it in perspective, by the way, the total number of ballots cast already represents almost 1/5 of the more than 136 million total ballots cast back in the last presidential election in 2016. And there's still a couple of weeks of early voting, let alone the actual vote on that day. So it is looking so far like we're gonna have a lot more participation in the 2020 election than back in 2016, Quay, although it remains to be seen who that actually benefits.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm no political analyst, but I generally hear political analysts say turnout benefits Democrats almost all the time. Not necessarily that everybody turning out when we have increased Democrats, but that usually means that we're going to get more Democratic votes in comparison. So, I mean, I don't know what to make of that. It is Texas. Folks are talking about, and I have this little spot in my heart, like you said, we lived there for a while, that Texas would turn blue. That would, I mean, maybe you tell me, but my understanding is if that happens, it's over. Like it's over. Like
So let's jump into Texas, because Yeah, exactly. So I introed this topic as if I care about all of the states, and I guess I do, but Texas is the part that I want to focus on. So Texas is leading the nation in early voting with over 4 million ballots already cast. So that's 4 million of the 29 million so far cast. Following closely behind is California, where I'm broadcasting from, with over 3 million votes, and Florida at 2.5 million. Texas's early votes account for nearly 14% of all the votes already cast nationally, and roughly 45% of the 9 million total votes counted in Texas during the 2016 presidential election. So they are already, just in Texas, almost at half of the vote. We're weeks away from election day.
Wow.
And so a couple things. I agree with you that new turnout probably benefits the Democrats for a couple of reasons. First of all, Republicans already generally have a turnout advantage. They're generally pretty good at that. Their voters are high enthusiasm. The Democrats not so much so. So if enthusiasm goes up, it's going to disproportionately benefit the Democrats. And in particular, in areas like Texas, where the vote, racial and other demographic breakdown doesn't tend to line up very well with the actual breakdown of the population there, increasing turnout raises the possibility that it could become more representative. And yeah, so in terms of Texas, if Texas flips, it's 38, I think 38 electoral votes. There's no plausible election or map where Trump loses so bad that he loses Texas and finds a way to make up 38 electoral votes in other states. That just probably isn't gonna happen. Now, we did live in Texas for a number of years. It's been hypothesized that this is coming. What do you think about the prospect of a blue Texas?
I think it's possible. I mean, usually southern states tend to be Republican or conservative, if you want. But of course, the other thing that you got to think about in a state, I think, is how many cities does it have? How many metropolitan areas, which of course tend to be blue? Well, Texas has like 5, major cities in it. It's obviously a vast state, so that dilutes some of that. And there's lots of country, and West Texas is almost all kind of small towns and little cities. But it seems like if Houston, Austin, we'll throw Dallas in there too, though it tends to be a more conservative city, in San Antonio, right? Get their stuff together. El Paso, get their stuff together, right? It seems like that's pretty possible. Beto O'Rourke, right, was trying to win and thought he could win for a minute that Senate seat.
It was close.
Yeah, and so I think it's possible, and I don't know. I just wonder what Republicans are going to do if Democrats could reliably, or even sometimes, hold both California and Texas. Is that it? For them in terms of national elections?
I mean, it kind of feels like, in terms of the national popular vote, it seems like it's been it for a bit. Yeah, right. that would be massive. Now, follow-up question would be, is this a durable change to Texas, or is this an anti-Trump wave? That would be important. But I think that, let's say that hypothetically they win Texas and it is a durable thing. It seems like we have, midterm elections and that goes blue too, something like that. I think that would have the single best chance of forcing Republicans to actually reconfigure their politics, and actually, because right now, the Republican Party is years and years out from even really trying to pretend to be offering a legislative alternative to the Democrats. They'll say we're going to repeal and replace Obamacare, but that's not a healthcare plan. Right. It's mostly doubling down on social, cultural issues and doubling down on voter suppression. If they lost Texas, then I feel like there has to be a change. They have to come up with something new, but that is going to run into the brick wall of their base increasingly being QAnon cultists and things like that, which aren't necessarily gonna be really amenable to, okay, well, here's our new view on climate change. That might be a rough period for the Republicans if that does happen.
Do you think if the Republicans split up in that way, you get kind of Republican classic, and then you get Republican Trump, I'll say. Do you think the Democrats would follow suit, right? Because there is a bit of a divide in the Democratic Party in terms of Bernie versus Biden, if you want, but kind of east west, but far left versus kind of moderate left. Do you think that split would kind of increase the likelihood or increase the process of that division as well? I know you're supposed to ask me questions.
Sorry, yeah, no, that's true. And I was a little bit distracted by my near Mike Pence moment. I don't know, there's no people here, there's no stuff here, but somehow there's a fly. Anyway, no, I don't think so. I think that the 2020 primary was a potential breaking point. Trump eased that away from breaking because like he's just so awful that it's easier to realize, okay, we can sort of set this aside for a couple of years, return to it. I think that Bernie has done literally everything he could have possibly been asked to do to try to keep these groups together. But the expectation is that Biden better deliver on some of what the left wants. And the way that 2024 goes is gonna be really critical too. I think that if the Dems are hot off of a landslide victory, which any Texas win would have to be accompanied by a landslide victory, we're talking like 400 electoral college votes or something like that, probably. Maybe not, but probably close to that. And the Republicans are falling apart. I think that would provide a bit of glue for the Democrats, possibly. I don't know for sure. And there's going to be an ideological reckoning in the Democratic Party over the next 4 years.
Sure.
I don't see it being as significant as that same divide for the Republicans if the Republicans are facing not being a nationally competitive party, hypothetically.
Right.
By the way, we might be getting way ahead of ourselves.
Of course.
Because if it turns out like Biden winning by 1% in Texas would be the biggest thing ever. Biden losing by 1 point, which is it was a very close Ted Cruz, Beto O'Rourke election, is like, like it's as irrelevant as them losing by 30. And so I really hope that they campaign there. I really hope that Biden actually takes a trip there. I feel like they could spare the time. And certainly there's people like, the Castros and Beto O'Rourke. A lot of people are trying to flip Texas.
Sure.
We'll see. We'll see in the end if it's successful.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of wishful thinking, but
it might be.
We wouldn't know that just in terms of how, I mean, election night's gonna be a mess anyway, but just in terms of when that would happen, it would be pretty far after some states that we were looking to see flip anyway. I mean, if things come in, all things being equal, right? Because we'd get Florida pretty early, we'd get, Pennsylvania, Ohio, right? Those states before we even got to Texas. And so at that point, it might not even be a question, it just might be a symbol of,
That's a great point. Because Florida not only will close a little bit earlier, but I have heard from people who know that Florida is positioned to count their mail-in ballots pretty fast. Texas might be too. I don't really know. From what I know about Texas election system more broadly, I would say that probably not. And if Florida goes for Biden, then it doesn't really matter if Texas goes for Biden. In terms of the election, it matters more generally. I would say the healthiest thing is just expect that you're not gonna know the results night of, anticipate a rough week, tune in to the damage report. That's what I would.
Oh, I'm so nervous.
I am too.
I'll be here.
Oh yeah. Okay, so we're gonna roll immediately into our next topic because we still got a few more things to get to, and we're at the 44-minute mark. So let's talk about this now. Donald Trump's little wink and a nod to QAnon at the last town hall probably didn't go unseen by them. And it's a part, by the way, of the mainstreaming of a theory that believes that almost every Democrat is both a Satanist and a pedophile, which seems pretty crazy. But I guess a lot of people have started to believe it because we have this new poll about what sort of people believe that QAnon is either partially or totally true. And it is something, man. So we're gonna bring this graphic up. And especially if you're on mobile, you're not gonna be able to make out the numbers, but I've got it, don't worry. I just want you to know that this is real. This is directly from the poll that we have. This is from the Yahoo News presidential election poll from just yesterday. And so let's take a look at a couple of the interesting things that leap out to me. If you see something, Quay, feel free.
Okay.
What's interesting is people who believe that it's an extremist conspiracy theory with no basis in fact, there's actually kind of a big gender gap there, with 12% more women saying it has no basis in fact, which I just want to stop there for a second because the way I've heard people talk about QAnon and the fact that it's combined with this overall concern for children, I think has implied that women are more likely to support it, to believe that it's true. But so far from this poll, that doesn't seem to be the case, that women are actually a little bit less likely to believe it, men a little bit more likely.
Do you think what I would want to know, just as my research brain kicking in, is what's the breakdown of male to female who tend to believe in kind of conspiracies anyway? I don't know this, but I would guess that it's probably men believe conspiracies more often than women. That's based on nothing except just kind of anecdotal evidence. So I wonder if this is just reflective of that it's not necessarily that this male female thing in terms of protecting children. It's just that men tend to believe conspiracy theories more so than women do, and it's not about that anyway. Yeah. I mean, like it's that's the cover, right? Is that it's just about
curious.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a good point, because if you're right, and I would say anecdotally, in my life, guys tend to be a little bit more interested in conspiracies. If guys are overwhelmingly more likely to believe most conspiracy theories than women, the fact that there's something like parity in this one actually would be an interesting finding. But I can't say for sure. I would say that there is a big, there's a racial gap. 56% of white respondents believe that it has no basis in fact. 63% of black respondents say it true. 77% of Hispanic respondents say that it's not true. So, I mean, that's not massive gaps, but this is a more white conspiracy theory than not. And again, I don't think that's going to shock people, considering how tied it is with like conservatism more broadly.
Yeah, that's a bit surprising to me, because I do really associate it with conservatism and kind of extreme wing of a Republican Party, and the fact that what's that, like 37% of black folks and 33, that would be my math wrong, 23% of Hispanic folks. That's a lot. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, considering what we usually see the breakdown of Democrat versus Republican or liberal versus conservative for folks of color. So some people of color are drinking that Kool-Aid too.
That's true. Now the area that's not going to shock people. The Kool-Aid, that's good. Oh, we need a shirt for that. They're drinking that Kool-Aid. Brought to you by Aqualus. So the thing that's not going to shock people, except perhaps the severity of the effect, is that there's nothing that predicts QAnon belief more than party ID and vote, the expected vote. So 83% of Democrats say it has no basis in fact. 83%. 55% of independents. So look, there's a gap there. It's almost 30 points, but the majority of independents don't believe that it's true. Only 20% of Republicans say it has no basis in fact. 20%. And here's what's interesting. 3% of Democrats are like, oh no, it's true. All those Democrats are satanic pedophiles eating babies. What are you, sir? I'm a Democrat. What's wrong with you?
I mean, it's this real, like, just psychologically, I think it's this real just othering, right? What's happening here is that we've, not necessarily Democrats, but some Republicans, some conservatives, and some Democrats have othered, the other party so much that what's the worst thing in society these days? Well, it's a pedophile, and we'll throw in baby eating and Satan worshiping just for a little bit of extra topping. And so I really think what's going on is it's just this conspiracy about, and I don't know that it's on purpose, but the reason it's being believed is because it's often easy to believe really negative things about people that you think are the other, people that you think are against you, that type of stuff. So somebody says, hey, did you hear that Hillary Clinton, whom you hate, eats babies after her husband has her way with them? Well, then you're gonna say, oh yeah, that sounds like Hillary. I thought she was evil this whole time. So I think it's really just evidence of that, kind of the divide in the country of how much sort of negativity we can think about the opposing political party.
Yeah, I think that you're probably right. It's really, like, I've talked for a long time about get out of thinking free cards, that cognitive effort is difficult, having to reconcile, like weighing pros and cons is difficult. People don't want that. Life is hard, they don't want it. They want something that tells them, I don't have to think about this anymore. Like Like thinking like, I'm gonna support Biden even though I disagree with him on a lot of issues. Oh, that's hard. That's why a lot of grifters don't do it. That's difficult. People don't want that. What's the best get out of thinking free card? Accepting that everyone you hate rapes babies.
Yeah,
because
easy.
You never have to give them an inch. If you believe they eat child faces, you're done. You don't have to think about anything at that point. So in hindsight, it almost seems inevitable. At some point, human tribalism gets to they're all baby eaters phase. That's the best possible.
That's the evolution. Yeah, the other thing.
Evolution. It's from the monkey to a man to you're a pedophile.
Baby, it's awful. So the other thing that happens is, this allows any sort of villainy towards that group, right? It allows you to say, these folks are so evil. I can go shoot them. I can beat them up. I can, be rude to them. I can yell at them in the store for whatever reason, right? All of these different things that aren't really happening so much, but you at least see them sort of pop up on the internet about these different types of encounters that happen at rallies, et cetera. And it allows for that way of thinking about the other because you've made them into child molesters and Satanists. And so now if I punch you in the face or shoot you, I just killed a pedophile. So, that's the way of thinking. So I don't know. It's pretty terrible, really.
Yeah, and it's not hypothetical. I mean, that Comet Pizza shooting happened. There have been other plots that have been foiled. There's been Q-related violence, and it's sad to see that as it's becoming a more common thing amongst conservatives, Republicans are just embracing it. Like they're openly embracing their QAnon supporting candidates. Trump is pretending that it's valid in some way in town halls. I don't know what it's going to look like in 3 years. It might be official. It literally could be in the platform. I honestly don't know. Things have moved so fast this year. Now, really fast, I do want to have you respond to a couple of individual instances of this. So let's roll onto these videos. CNN sent a reporter to one of these QAnon gatherings that's been happening in LA. They're pretty common. What are you gonna do? It's LA. But anyway, here is a couple of the individuals that the CNN reporter interacted with. The first explains how with a little bit of wordplay, you just have to accept that QAnon is true.
You don't believe it's a conspiracy theory?
No, it's definitely not. Pizza is a code word for child pornography. Cheese pizza, child pornography.
But then there's all this stuff online that seems, as your mom might say, a bit crazy.
Well, what we're saying is crazy is the Satanists who are hurting children, not the people who are trying to expose it and say.
Okay, but so if I say, I believe that everyone around me is literally a robot, okay? That's just true. And then you say, John, that's crazy. And I say, you think it's crazy to think they're robots? I think it's crazy to deny that they're robots. Being a robot is what's crazy. Okay, I know that seems clever, like saying CP, cheese pizza, child pornography seems clever, but there's nothing actually there. And the reason I wanted you to respond to this is because you've dealt with abnormal psychology. You've dealt with flawed thought processes. What do you think about the sort of willful gullibility about some of the key claims in QAnon?
Yeah, I mean, again, I really do think it comes down to this ability to believe like a lot of negativity about somebody that you've cast as your adversary, as a villain in the world. And so, I think the fact that people are just kind of ready to believe something negative. It really is about justifying one's own hatred, one's own violence, if it comes to that, or disregard. As people, we want to feel like we're good people. We want to feel like I would never hurt anybody who deserves not to be hurt, right? And so you've got to protect your ego in this way. And the fact that you hate somebody, or the fact that you want to see them dead, or the fact that, lock them up even, right? You've got to justify for yourself why that's okay. Well, why is it okay that I want to be mean or violent or, disrespectful even to this other person? And so you really just start looking for things to confirm your feelings, right? Your feelings that are really just fickle and coming out of your own egoism or whatever, right? You're just looking for things to confirm that. And so I think QAnon offers this perfect thing, and the fact that it's gathering traction means that other people believe it. And so I don't feel so crazy if I say it now. And here we are, right? Folks are believing that our politicians are baby eaters.
Yeah, and they're grounding that belief in letter play, like CP. And as someone noted in Twitch, and I was gonna mention, so here is how sick and manipulative this is. So they believe that cheese pizza stands for child porn, and that's relevant because in one of the Podesta emails back in 2016, they talk about cheese pizza. So they talked about cheese pizza. It must mean CP because CP is also child porn. But here's the thing. CP does, in a specific context, stand for child pornography. Not in Podesta emails, but on 4chan for literally years, that was what they called child pornography. You know why? Because they shared child pornography. And that's where all of the QAnon stuff started coming from. So that's the sick den where they're actually consuming that stuff, but they're the trustworthy ones because they told us that's what it means, but it only means that there, not for normal, healthy people. Democrats aren't hanging out on there. That's not a big lib haven. That's crazy right-wing stuff. You guys have the problem.
So let me give you a quick a little psych lesson, right? So that and I know we've talked about this, but that is to the thief, everyone's a thief. I'm stealing, and I'm not a bad person, so everybody steals. I mean, you got to get by, right? This is projection, and then it becomes what we call reaction formation, which is you can feel how you want about the thing that you're doing, but the real crux of it is I start to hate that in myself, but I can't hate myself. I want to defend my ego. So I'm gonna find other people that are doing it, or I'm gonna say that other people are doing it, and then I'm gonna hate them instead. I'm not the pedophile, even though I'm on 4chan trading, child pornography. I'm not the pedophile. Instead, you're the pedophile, and I hate you for it. Even though I'm doing the same thing. It's hypocrisy 101. And I think that's what's going on if you think about it from a psychological perspective, putting those things together. Why are they blaming other people for the things that they're doing? Well, they know what they're doing is wrong and they want to feel better about it. It's all about the ego, man.
It is. You want an example of what you just said? So, but I don't think you can have a subreddit about QAnon anymore. But when they did, one of them had to shut down. Do you know why it had to shut down? Because the mod admitted that he had been struggling with his desire to view child pornography, and so he had to take some time off. It's projection. You're 100% right.
That's it.
We are joined today by Dr. Aqualus Gordon, who's done quite a bit of research around the Myers-Briggs personality profiling system. And I have speculated a ton over the past few years about Donald Trump and just trying to get a little bit of knowledge about how his brain works. So, Quay, I want to know, what is up with the Myers-Briggs profile for Donald Trump? Obviously speculative, he hasn't done the test, but you know people. What would you say he is and what does it mean?
Sure. So most people think that Trump is an ESTP, that is to say, an extroverted, sensing, thinking perceiver. He's such a good prototype of this type that whenever I'm seeing students or clients and they test this. Probably not clients as much, but I often will say this is Trump's type, and he's an unusual version of that type, and so it's sort of a good example and a bad example in that he's really extreme in some of the ways that type can function and some of that type's characteristics. And so he's an extrovert, just to break it down, right? So he's an extroverted person. This means that he's really focused more on his outside life, his outside experience, and he is focused on his inner experience. It doesn't necessarily mean he's a partier. It doesn't necessarily mean he's not shy, but those tend to go along with the fact that you're spending more psychological time outside yourself. And so Trump's not shy, and he tends to be pretty outspoken and pretty sociable as well. The S in this case stands for censor, which means that the thing that he's focused on mostly in the world, that combined actually with the P at the end, suggests that he's really focused on sort of the literal details of the world. You see this in Trump's personality, in his focused and interest on things that are beautiful, the fact that he likes really extravagant and elaborate things. This includes, not just things, but also people, women, usually, right? That he's got this real focus on kind of the way things look, the way they feel, the way they smell, the way they taste. We kind of know the way he eats, for instance, is just kind of, greasy, probably very good tasting food, but not the kind of concern for like its health benefits or those things that you would have to intuit about the food without just kind of tasting it. So that is the most dominant aspect of his personality, is that sort of looking for what's beautiful, looking for what's appealing to his literal senses, is what that S stands for. And then he's a thinker, and folks say,
wait, I'm gonna have to stop you right there.
Yeah,
you're gonna need to provide some evidence. Where are your citations, sir?
Sure, I'll give you. I mean, not citations, but I'll give you some analysis at least. The thing about thinkers is they're not necessarily smarter. They're not necessarily smarter. What's going on for a thinker is that they're making decisions based on their own, in Trump's case in particular, their own sense of logic, their own sense of facts, right? So versus a feeler who's going to be making decisions based on how they feel about things or how other people feel about things, a thinker is going to try to be making decisions based on the facts or the context of the situation, like what needs to happen. But a thinker is only as intelligent as the facts that they have in their head. We know about Trump that he does all sorts of things with facts. And so for him, when he's kind of put fact A to fact B means I should do X, Y, or Z, well, his facts are what they are, who knows? And so even though he thinks he's being logical, and this is one of the problems, I would say, with how he comes across in policy sometimes, is that he thinks he's being right because he's being, in his mind, logical. But he's not. His facts are off base, and so he's not coming to often a conclusion that is really based in true fact. Now, if he was a feeler, he'd have a better sense of, well, this is just how I feel about it. This isn't necessarily truth. This isn't necessarily fact. It's just my feelings. But he doesn't have that capacity, or he doesn't tend to have that capacity. So he will state, this is the truth. People are saying, right? And that's enough for him to kind of build a case for X, Y, and Z. So you just really get, in general, the ESTP is this really kind of brash. Folks call this type the Chad type, if you will, kind of wanting to look a certain way, very much about image, very much about being kind of the party guy or girl, not caring too much about other people's opinion, doing what they want when they want to do it, right? And so in all of those kind of plus and minus ways, I think Trump adds up to that. And he also does so in such an extreme way that sometimes I fear to tell students or clients that they share a type with him.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I have a couple questions. The first is, so you described the being interested in how things look, wanting luxury excess, the eating the food that tastes good, just wanting to experience these things. So what it doesn't seem, I'll be nice, it doesn't seem that this really translates into wanting his own appearance to be very good. I understand he paints a circle of color on his face. Maybe that's evidence of it, but he doesn't seem to think that he needs to keep himself in a certain type of shape. He wears really ill-fitting clothing. I don't know, is this just him making mistakes but still prioritizing it? Or is this not necessarily something that you would expect to be consistent?
I think you would expect, or I think you can see from Trump that he is really focused on his own image. I mean, it's not like, I just showed up like this, and he's gonna tell you he looks good and his hair looks good and his his makeup or his tan, whatever he's calling it that day, looks good, right? He's gonna say all of those things because he is focused on that. Again, his sense of what looks good to some degree are based on the facts in his head, which is to say, blonde hair looks good. A full head of blonde hair looks good. A nice tan looks good, right? And so like these are the things that he's sort of prioritizing. But again, you got to cut that with such and such tastes good, right? He's not able to necessarily, I think, kind of take away from one to feed the other, right? These type of people, extroverts in general, but this extrovert in particular, are very moment to moment livers. That's why he changes his opinion all the time, by the way, because he doesn't think about the past or the future version of himself or what he said. He's just like, well, I'm just answering the question right now. I'm just eating what's in front of me. I'm just, doing my hair right now. And so he's not going to necessarily think long term about, well, if I eat McDonald's today, I'm not going to look good for the debate in a couple weeks, right? He doesn't think that way. He thinks, I want McDonald's right now, and that's what he goes for.
I mean, who among us hasn't made that mistake?
Yeah, of course.
Yesterday. Okay, that's interesting, and yeah, it's really fascinating. I wish that we had a lot more time, but I do want. Obviously, we can't go in this much in depth, but I want your brief reaction to. First of all, Biden is the guy that's going up against him. I've seen him described as an ESFP. First of all, does that seem accurate to you? And what are some differences we would expect between the ESTP and the ESFP?
I don't know that Biden's an ESFP, so I haven't really thought about what he is, but I'll talk about the difference, and maybe we can, or the viewers at least can think about what if that's true or not. Those two types are actually really, really similar. The fact that they have an E, an S, and then a P at the end are actually saying that they have the same dominant trait in terms of their personality. The difference is when I was describing Trump is making decisions based on his sense of fact, right? His sense of what's right and wrong and how that can be wrong to start with. If Biden is a ESFP, then he's going to replace that in particular with making decisions based on his feelings. How does something make him feel? Not necessarily how it affects someone else, but how it makes him feel. And generally folks like this, will feel bad if they do bad things. And so they will try to, make good decisions out of those feelings. But it is just kind of a feelings-based thing. What we can see about Biden is that he is a lot more empathic. He is a lot more feelings-based. He does seem to make decisions a lot more so based on his feelings than Trump does.
That makes sense to me. I think so.
Yeah. So I think it's maybe close, but I don't know if that's exactly right.
Okay, yeah, and some of the other letters seem to make sense for him. He does seem somewhat extroverted. Now I've seen Bernie Sanders described as an INFP. So a couple letters different. That's introverted. What's the N?
Intuitive.
Feeling, perceiving. Okay, so what about? Does that seem to strike you as he's a little bit more of an introverted and intuitive person?
I would say those first two letters line up for me, and maybe even the second letter. This type of introvert's one of the most introverted introverts, and so it would be really tough to know if this is who Bernie Sanders really is, because he's not going to be able to really be this guy in on stage. He's not going to be able to be this guy when he's in a public image. He's got to talk. He's got to, be charismatic to some degree or sell his message. This type of person, the INFP, I bet there's a lot in the chat room. They tend to be on the internet a lot. So, but they're really, really sensitive generally, and they have a real empathy for people, but they also have a real sensitivity about who they are and things that are said or done to them. And so they can be in that way a little bit prickly, and we do see that for instance, about Bernie Sanders, that he does come across as a little bit prickly if you ask him the wrong question in the wrong light. And they're also able, with their intuition, able to kind of put a lot of ideas together or think about a lot of possibilities with regards to ideas. And I would say that this also is reflective of Bernie, who tends to think outside of the box, even just by nature of being a democratic socialist, right? That's kind of off the path because he can kind of see what that might mean for the country, right? He's using some intuition to kind of predict what would come out of that. And so I think it's pretty close. It's tough to tell that type in particular because of how introverted they would be in a more private moment. And that's how you'd be able to tell. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do. For one other politician, I'm gonna choose at random. Of all the politicians, I'm gonna go with Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Okay, so I'm gonna guess. I'm gonna start with the first letter. You stop me when I'm wrong, okay?
Okay, sure.
So I'm gonna guess she's extroverted.
Yeah,
Am I
I
right
think
so
so.
far?
Sure.
Okay, I'm gonna guess that she's intuitive. She's an EN.
Oh, definitely, yes.
I'm gonna guess that she's a T, an ENT, a thinker.
Okay, perhaps.
And then I'm gonna say a P. I think she's an ENTP. What do you think about that? Is that a thing?
It is a thing. Oh, ENTP. That's a really great guess. My first guess would be an ENFP, which is actually my type. And not trying to say anything about that, but I'm just saying, I was just making that connection. But the thing that you'll have to sort of look through to kind of get at that is her passion. ENFPs and ENTPs are both very passionate people when it comes to ideas and discussing those ideas. ENFPs are gonna argue with more passion in the sense of, empathy and how's this gonna make people feel, and you're offending me by saying that thing. Like they're gonna argue with feelings in the mix. They're gonna reference those things, whether it's arguing for someone else's feelings or their own, or did you consider. The T's are gonna again try to argue based in fact. They're gonna argue based in this happened and then this happened. How can you say that this happened then? Right? It's not gonna be personal, but it's gonna be kind of personal to their logic in the same way that Trump can be personal to his logic. But again, if you get good facts, then that's gonna work out for you. If you have bad facts, then your logic's gonna be bad. So pretty close, I think ENTP or ENFP. I say F just because she is a very passionate person, and she does have a way of bringing the facts, but I feel like she's always referencing, the effect that it's having on people. That's the thing she seems to be holding as her bottom line. I would say not just is this right or wrong, but how is this affecting people?
Okay. And I already said this to the Twitch audience, but I'll just throw it out there. I believe an INTJ. Do with that what you will. Chat.
That's why we're so great together, buddy.
Apparently it's a good combination, ENFP and INTJ. That's what I hear. Not saying anything, just saying. Anyway, so unfortunately we are way over. So I think we're gonna have to leave our next topic that we're planned for your next appearance on the show.
All right.
We're talking a little bit about pop culture, representation, diversity, and all of that, because we watch a lot of the same sort of stuff, and we've seen a lot of movement in that area. But with the time we have left, where can people follow you for your perspectives on psychology, politics, and everything else?
Sure, you can find me on Twitter at Aqualus. Is probably the easiest place to find me. I have a website if you happen to be in the Kansas City area and you're interested in some type of consultation or psychological services. Headstrongcounseling.com is where you can find me there. And otherwise, you'll see me talking to John in the chat room when he's doing the show.
Awesome. Sounds good, man. It's nice to be able to get your first name as your Twitter handle.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people can get that.
You get a weird name, you can have that.
There you go. Let's see if Senator David Perdue can pronounce it. Anyway, thank you for joining us. Great to have you here. Have a good one, Quay.
Yeah, thanks, man.
I would like to welcome back to the show the co-initiator of Refuse Fascism and the host of the RNL, Revolution Nothing Less show, Andy Z. Welcome back to the Damage Report.
Thank you so much, John. It's good to see you again. Good to be on your show again.
It's good to see you. The last time we spoke was before, the fall of man. It's been a big time, and we were just speaking, before the show about sort of how our role in all of this, how we communicate all of this, what we're focusing on has had to shift with how much things have changed. In that time, you've launched a show. So tell me a little bit about what the last period has been like for you and your fight against fascism.
Well, as you know, John, as soon as Trump was elected by December 2016, we formed an organization called Refuse Fascism. We recognized the danger that the Trump-Pence regime would present to humanity. And we had a bold idea of trying to prevent the inauguration by demonstrating in the streets. It didn't work, but we actually had full page ads in the New York Times, Washington Post. And for the last 4 years, we have been sounding the alarm and mobilizing people. And right now we're right up against it. I mean, how I've been is very concerned about this and doing everything I can to mobilize people, including that I came here to LA in the winter to start this show. The RNL Revolution Nothing Less show, which takes its name from a speech given by the revolutionary leader Bob Avakian, and that it is a show that is about revolution. It's about how to understand where the problems we're facing in the world comes from, not just the damage it can do, but what's behind that damage, what kind of system is it, and how we could actually bring about a better world. In the current period, the last couple of months, we've pretty much devoted most of the show to driving out the Trump-Pence regime, because every struggle that people are involved in, every ache of the heart, people in concentration camps, children being ripped from their parents, people being shot down in the street by racist police, every single struggle, every single aspiration now has to go through this regime being removed from power. If it's not removed from power, it is going to be devastating to humanity. It actually is, to use a big word, existential. What he is doing to the climate could mean that Earth uninhabitable for a large majority of humanity. And don't forget, this is somebody who says if we have nuclear weapons, why can't we use them? And he's a desperate man, and it's a fascist. Yeah. And look, whether you understand what fascism is, whether you agree with Refuse Fascism on what fascism actually is, if you see the danger of this man, we have to act now. And that includes voting in huge numbers against Trump, not for some protest candidate, but for the Democrat. But that is not enough. This is a very serious situation. We have to be in the streets, and we have to be in the streets now, not after he commits the act, but before he commits the act of theft of the election.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about what the next 2 weeks are going to be like, what happens on and after election day. Really fast though, we were speaking before the show, and we were talking about how you just listed some of the insane things that Trump and his administration have done over the past 6 months or so. We're saying a lot of people still don't get it, and obviously there's some regular people that don't get it. But it seemed to me like a lot of Democratic leadership, like they'll talk about him in many of the same words you will, that it's an existential threat and all of that. But they don't seem to really be acting as if they truly believe it. They don't seem to me to be acting as if Trump is seriously going to try to steal this election. They seem like they're proceeding through with these negotiations about the stimulus as just some sort of thing that might happen or might not. The nomination of Amy Coney Barrett, like you have Dianne Feinstein talking about what an amazing process it was, and they still seem to be going about things as if we're years and years before Donald Trump. Do you agree?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Look, the Democrats are not going to fight this election campaign, and they will not resist Trump the way he needs to be resisted. This has been true throughout the entire nature of the campaign. All right, this is just, partially you have to understand who the Democrats are and what their actual role is. Years ago, Bob Avakian had said that if you try to make the Democrats what they are not, you will actually become more like what they actually are. Which is to say, this is a party that does not want to govern on the basis of combating white supremacy. I mean, this is a government that doesn't want to govern on the basis of allowing immigrants into the country in any kind of humane way. They're not fascists. They're not like Trump, and in such, that's why we do have to see that there's a big difference between what Trump represents and what the Democrats represent. But if you rely on that, they will say over and over again. What do they say, John? This is not normal. This is not presidential. This is not how it's being done. This is what they say. It's not how it's being done. How long? How many times do you have to go through that? It's before you recognize that Trump and these Republican Party have ripped up that rule book. They're not playing by those rules. They got a different way America should be governed, okay? The Democrats want to keep playing by the same rules. He doesn't care about the rules. In fact, he's trying to change the rules. And so if you don't understand that, you're gonna keep having the same thing. And the pundits on mainstream TV I don't know how many, I can't even watch MSNBC TV, but I do watch it. But it's so annoying. They keep saying, well, that was really out of order. Yeah, fascists are out of order. That's their job description. A narcissistic psychopath is not a disqualification for being a fascist leader. In fact, one could argue it's a job qualification because you're willing to say anything and do anything. And right now it's just so visceral where he is actually bludgeoning the Americans with his white supremacist stuff around, I'm trying not to curse here, John, around the pandemic and just beating people up on this. And it numbs people, it gets them used to it. They long for going back to normal, but there is no normal. That's one of the things that we have to, this is why Refuse Fascism is saying, we got to get in the streets now. Yes, vote for the Democrats, and it's a struggle to vote for the Democrats. It's amazing these black voters in Georgia and Texas standing in line for 12 hours while in the white suburbs in those states, people get in and out in 15 minutes, and then he's going to impound a lot of those votes. We could talk about this Amy Coney Barrett nomination as a concentration of what happens when you play by the polls and the rules. What happens is fascism advances. The Democrats did not put up a fight. And she was being expressly put in there for the purpose of securing his election to president after he contests what happens, disarms the public that it's fraudulent, that it was fake, that there was irregularities, takes it through the state legislatures, takes it through the courts until he gets to the court that's gonna give him the result that he has put her in there for. Leaving aside, go ahead.
Which she'll almost certainly be on at that point. And she was asked multiple times, whether she would recuse herself from election-related cases involving Donald Trump, and she refused to do so, which tells us literally everything we need to know. Trump says he never asked her about any of that stuff. I'll believe that as much as I believe virtually anything Donald Trump has ever said to me. So I think a prerequisite for more conversation is currently anything could happen, things can change. What do you see election day and the aftermath looking like? Like, what are you assuming is likely to be true and acting accordingly? How do you think this is gonna play out in terms of the vote, Trump's response, all of that?
Well, that's as a difficult a question as it is important, because I can tell you what I think. Look, a lot depends, to be honest, on what people do. If we could fill this, look, just imagine this nomination of Amy Coney Barrett going to committee on Thursday, full vote on Friday. Imagine if and this gets to your question, why are people keep not getting what you're saying? Because they're being told something different that more corresponds to them staying in their comfort zone and not actually confronting what they have to do. For much of my life, I was wondering, how did the German people let what happened in Germany happen? Well, now you see it right in front of you. But imagine if the Democratic Party and all the various, if different people had called people out into the streets as Refuse Fascism has done. Imagine if there had been 50,000 people in the streets every day in Washington for 2 weeks and hundreds of thousands on the weekends. Do you think this nomination be going through? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think at then the Democrats there who asked them a couple of good questions but didn't do any follow through, and she gave answers that were absolute BS and evasive, but they just moved on, culminating in Dianne Feinstein giving a big hug to Lindsey Graham and saying this was the best hearing ever. You see, so between now and the election, if we mobilize people, that's one scenario. But if things stay as they are, which we're going to bust every sinew in our body to be sure doesn't happen, if people start getting in the streets, building the unity, people with very divergent political views, backgrounds, and all of this start getting in the streets every day in cities and towns across the country, it could be a different outcome. As it's looking now, I think that on election eve, most likely Biden will be ahead, but they won't be able to call it. Maybe Trump will be ahead and they won't be able to call it. And right away, the Republicans and their media, the fascist news media, fascist news network, Fox TV, is going to be putting out, they'll have pictures of 100 ballots in a dumpster. They'll be casting doubt. They'll be contesting it in different states. Mail-in ballots will be impounded in different places. And Joe Biden will say, be calm, be calm. The vote, count the votes, whoever gets the most votes wins. But in the meantime, Trump has already been stealing the election. People have already been disqualified and kicked off voter rolls. That's gonna accelerate through the month of December. And the question's gonna be, will people stand up and say what we've been saying, Trump Pence out now in the city square? Yes, or your life's already on hold, just by the way, everybody, with the pandemic, you know this. So get your masks, we'll stand 6 feet apart, we'll do it outdoors, but let's make a political crisis like we did in June and July for Black lives. I don't think people know, John, what they accomplished. I've been around a little bit, and I never heard political leaders talking about white supremacy being systemic in this country. Never.
That's true, yeah.
You did that, you people. You did that. They didn't decide to do that. They didn't suddenly listen to reason. They were worried because of what you were doing. That has to happen now.
Yeah. So I have a feeling I probably know what you're going to say, and I probably already agree with you. But we know that in 2000. Al Gore did sort of an impersonation of your impersonation of Biden there. Just be calm, it's gonna be fine. And then the Supreme Court got involved and he went along with it. And Amy Coney Barrett was actually involved in that case, which is scary in its own way. So I'm assuming that if Trump asks the Supreme Court to stop the count of the mail-in ballots, or if state legislatures do, or if one of the state legislatures decides, screw the popular vote, we're giving our votes to Donald Trump. Do you think that Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer are gonna basically pull an Al Gore and just go along with it in the hopes of unity or God knows what after that?
Well, one is I don't know. Okay, I don't know. I mean, I think that would be Biden's proclivity on a personal level, and certainly his political history indicates that. I don't know what they'll do, but again, a lot's gonna depend on what the people do. A tremendous amount depends on that, because it becomes a point where you lose credibility also in terms of the Democratic Party. I don't know that they'll do that, but I think one thing that's different, George W. Bush, as you know, neither of us were fans of, but at that point, there was some semblance among some people, or belief that there were people in the Republican Party who cared more about their republic than about this fascist agenda. And it was kind of a mixed bag of people. That's not the case now. This is clear. And one of the things about now, people, again, to come into the streets don't have to agree or understand what fascism is. They just have to see the danger of all this. But look, one of the things that fascism is a different form of rule has to do is it has to neutralize one way or another its opposition in power. And you have Democratic county chairmen fearing for their lives all throughout the Midwest. You have MAGA armed militia coming into state houses such that legislators have to wear vests. You have a governor being threatened with, and a mayor in Wichita. You have a governor being threatened with kidnapping. And what does Trump say? Lock them all up. At that moment, there should be impeachment hearings right away in Congress. You see, look, and I'm not a believer in this system, but I think sometimes, at least I'm insisting on it more than most of the people who rule this system. Yeah. So, but I think if we get out there in the way we need to, that could compel them to better. They also have some interest in, though, look, one of my favorite bands, The Clash, said the future is unwritten, and that's true. So I can't sit here with a crystal ball and say this is going to definitely happen, that's going to definitely happen. I will say that when you and I talked about this actually 3 years ago, Steve Bannon and George and Giuliani and actually I think Newt Gingrich all said at the beginning, this is our last chance to bring about a Christian America, or they wouldn't say a fascist America, but a Christian. This is our last chance for our whole program. This is our last chance with Donald Trump. I think that is true for them, especially now that they've begun this. And I do think that they will fight to hold on to this power by every and all means, by hook or by crook. I think that is true, and to not believe that is very dangerous. So there's no, I don't want to be the voice of doom here, but we are actually facing a doomsday scenario here if we don't act, and there's no other way. And acting, and I want to be absolutely clear, nonviolent, peaceful protests involving masses of people. At one of our rallies, a historian, I think St. Joshua Shanes, came and he spoke about a town in Germany in the 1930s, and he said the thing that this town lacked to be able to stop fascism from taking root in that town is there wasn't a coalition of the decent people. Okay, and that's kind of an interesting word, but what he was trying to convey is you need everybody who hates this to say, we will not stand for this. Because once you accept, once you can live, once you can go to sleep peacefully with people in concentration camps in your country, once you can live with children being separated from their parents, once you can live with all of that, you're well on your way to agreeing to almost anything. And that's really what people have to say. And I know people can do better and will do better than that, but we have to, that's a big role that your show and other shows and what we're trying to do with a much smaller audience at this point, but we're trying to grow it because we think we're bringing a truth that people need to hear. It's not our truth, it's actually what's happening. It's actually what's happening right in front of our eyes. And its unbelievability is actually an expression of how extreme the situation is, and one should take, not have your eyes wide shut, but believe your lion eyes or your truthful eyes in that case.
Yeah, on the unbelievability. I mean, you mentioned after the Whitmer plot was thankfully foiled, that Trump can at a debate effectively reiterate the insane demands of the terrorists and imply that she should be locked up, which obviously the police are not going to do. So presumably someone else would have to, and we know what sort of people are trying to do that. If he can do that, then he can do anything. And he sailed past it, and it was news for 9 hours maybe, and then we're all moving on. So anyway, I'm glad that you mentioned your show. We're running up against our deadline, but I did want to ask you about your show, both because I'm curious. I want people to know where they can find it, but also give you an idea of, you've been talking throughout this about the need for the people to be out there, to be a presence, to make sure that we're not relying on Chuck Schumer to suddenly grow a backbone. So tell me about your show, where people can see it, and over the next 2 weeks until the election, what's the path for your show during that time?
Okay, and I would say also people should go to refusefascism.org, and we do segments that show up there. And even though Refuse Fascism includes Democrats and never Trumpers and all kinds of people from diverse political points of view. Well, our show is we put it out every Thursday, 5 p.m. Pacific time. I think this week actually we're going to do something we call dispatches, just short little things. We have my co-host Sansara Taylor is down in Washington at the Supreme Court, and so she's going to do a dispatch today. And so we'll just do some 15-minute segments this week. I think the last thing people need to be doing Thursday night is all gathering around their computers. So as one show, although we patch it together. But the show is about knowing the world and changing the world in a radically different direction. I'm just thinking in our interview, you should come as a guest. We've had recently Linda Greenhouse. She's the legal reporter for the New York Times. Jason Stanley from Yale University did a book called On Fascism, Understanding. Let's see, what is the name? How Fascism Works.
Yes. Yeah, I believe he's been on my show a couple of times, actually.
He has been, and so he and I did an hour and a half dialogue. It was very rich, and in fact, he too called for people to act, which is something he hadn't been doing before, but recognizing the danger. Chuck D from Public Enemy. So we have interviews with people, but we also interview people out on the street. People from South Central to Hollywood. We have some people who do things in different cities and send us the tapes. And we've got this amazing series called American Crime. So we have a wonderful filmmaker, the documentary filmmaker Dave Zeiger, who made the film Sir No Sir, who's been doing these animated segments about, the last one was fantastic. He took the last 8, actually we came up with it together. We took the last 8 minutes of Trump's acceptance speech, where he talked about America, the pioneers and all that, and juxtaposed it against what happened to the Native Americans in just a beautiful, beautiful segment. We did something on Tulsa the same way. So we've been helping people to understand that there's a history behind this. It didn't just come up with some rogue cop in Kenosha, Wisconsin. There's a history behind this. You can understand that history. It's a history that's largely been hidden from you. How many people actually thought about all these Confederate statues till people began acting around them? How many people even know that it's not an accident that Donald Trump has Andrew Jackson's statue, or did have it in his room? I guess he removed it, but it was in there for a while. So this is what we do on the show, and we're trying to bring an understanding of the world to people and a way to act. And the main mission of the show is for people to get into the revolutionary leader, Bob Avakian, and understand how he's developed the science of revolution, the science of communism, beyond what it had been in the 20th century, while learning from those revolutions. And that you're not going to solve the problems of this world by wishing them away or just tinkering at the edges. You need a different system. Humanity could do so much better than this. There's no reason for 65 million people be wandering the globe for a place to live because we're despoiling the environment and destroying it with wars, and everywhere fascism and religious fundamentalism rearing its head instead of science. It's killing humanity, and it's not necessary. We can do far better, and that's what our show is about, a better world. It's not an easy road, but here we are.
I agree. All I want is someday us to do an interview and just talk about, things they're going okay. It's probably gonna be a ways away, but maybe, Andy, maybe someday we'll be able to do that talk.
Well, I'm game, and why don't you? I'm serious. Come on the show and we'll talk about that.
That sounds good.
What it would take to get there, and how in our little microcosms we're actually trying to start creating that and penetrating the mass of people to where people do say, you know what, basta ya, enough's enough. We can do better than this.
Andy Z, as always, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
All right, John, you be well, and glad to be back.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.